I'm Scott Hanselman, and it's another episode of Hansel Minutes. Today I'm chatting with Sam Rose. How are you, sir?
Very good, thank you. How are you?
I am getting there, getting better. Had a little bit of the Rona, did not feel good for a while, so had a little trouble scheduling the show, but I do appreciate you being flexible with me as I come out of my my little brief sickness there.
Yeah, no problem.
So you blog at samwho.dev. And, I am and was a longtime blogger. I blogged for almost 20 years, and I recently started to slow down. I used to blog every Tuesday and Thursday, basically for 20 years. And it just kind of twice a week became once a week, became once a month. And now I think it's more about quality, not quantity. And you have such a quality to your blog posts. How did you find that bespoke blog, quality and decide that it's okay to blog 3 times a year?
And I didn't start out that way. Like, I've been blogging for something like almost 15 years now. Like, my blog goes back, I think, to like 2011, but I was writing a bit before that as well. It took a long time to find something that brings together all of the skills that create the post that you see today. So there's a lot of front-end stuff that needs to be done in there. So the visualization is the interactive elements. The kind of writing style as well is something that I've had to develop over a long time and get better at. I really love the blog posts of, do you know Bartosz Chrzanowski?
I do not.
He's done a lot of brilliant posts. He posts maybe once or twice a year, but they're all, for example, he's done one on mechanical watches, but he actually created a fully working 3D simulation of a mechanical watch. And at the very beginning of this post, you can play around with this 3-dimensional mechanical watch and you can explode it. So you see all the different pieces come out like a really nice 3D visualization of them. They're all color-coded as well. And he takes you through this really enormous post where he explains what every single component of that mechanical watch does. And I looked at these and I've loved them for years. And I thought, I really want to do that. I really want to do that for programming. And I knew I wouldn't get to the level that he does. He's very practiced at it. I think he is in some way professionally involved in using CAD. So he's got 3D modeling skills outside of his posts. I decided to start at a bit more simple. I was like, how far can I get with reasonably simple 2-dimensional animation? And I began with load balancing in this form, because before I'd written my load balancing post, I hadn't written anything for a good while. And I'd had this buildup of creative energy that I hadn't had anywhere to show it, to outlet it. And I took a topic I knew reasonably well. I took the style I wanted in Bartosz's work, and I made a visualization of what I think of when I think of load balancing. So it came from there, really. It's just this gradual buildup and wanting to make a post with longevity. So I'm very careful not to use things that would age badly. So I don't talk about many specific technologies. I try and keep it with concepts and ideas. So my load balancing post talks about different algorithms, but it won't talk about, for example, Nginx or some specific implementation of these things. You mentioned in the beginning of your question there that you've come to realize that quality is important. I think the rest of the world has gone the other way, and especially with more and more algorithmic curation of feeds, one of the things I think is over-rewarded at the moment is frequency. I think algorithms they reliably reward you if you are posting every day or several times a week in a consistent fashion. And with textual content becoming a bit easier to produce with LLMs and things like that, people are putting out lower quality but higher frequency content to be better rewarded by curation algorithms. And it helps quality stand out, I think.
I think maybe 10 years ago, I tried to do some very, very simple interactive blogs. And I got kind of an analysis paralysis because it was a different internet. It was more of a jQuery internet at the time. And I got all in my head. And when I say analysis paralysis, I mean I literally didn't end up doing it and did it poorly because I overthought it and decided it was not possible. Because I'm like, well, SEO, and it's an interactive page, and interactive pages do poorly, and Google won't really know what to do with it. do I load all the JavaScript locally? Do I pull in the jQuery CDN? There's 20 different little technical reasons why I convinced myself that it was going to bit rot. And when I say bespoke, I feel like yours is bespoke. But at the same time, when I view source, I find a lot of minimized JavaScript.
Yes.
So I feel like the view source web that I learned on, I'm not able to dig in. I know that I could figure out how you did it, but I spent about 5 minutes trying to figure out how you did it. And I kind of gave up because it wasn't immediately obvious. So I guess my question to you is, how do you make it self-contained, where you're feeling confident that it is going to have longevity? Because I felt at the time there wasn't a good way to do it that was going to not just spontaneously stop working. Because we were at a time when the browsers were just pumping out new versions all the time. And any random Tuesday, you could wake up and your blog would not work anymore. The web seems to have stabilized a little bit. Did you have any challenges trying to decide how you were going to build the platform on which you were going to build the visualizations? In the beginning,
I didn't think super hard about it. I found a way to render 2D graphics. So I use Pixie JS, Pixi.js, and I ran with that. So Pixie JS is a pretty popular 2D rendering library for JavaScript. And it's served me extremely well. So everything I've written so far uses Pixie JS in some fashion. But I have come to think more about this now. And I am also a bit annoyed that you can't just view source. I'm a bit annoyed that, I'll preface this by saying Pixie JS has been fantastic. It's a really nice library to work with. The problem I have is that it's a pretty heavy library. It's something like 600 kilobytes. And I use a tiny slice of what it can do for the things that I write. So much so that I've, in my spare time, been experimenting with building my own 2D rendering library, specifically tailored for the things that I want to do, that is as small as it can be. So I've got to a point now where I think I could probably recreate some of my simpler visualizations, and it's less than 10 kilobytes of JavaScript. What I'm trying to do is very, very simple. I'm moving simple shapes around the screen. So these things have started to come a bit more to the forefront as I've gotten more confident with Pixie JS and what I am doing. I would love to be able to ship versions of my posts, and I think I will be able to do this, that you can view source, and there is no minification going on, and it is readable. To get around that nowadays, I have a GitHub repo where I have all of the code for my stuff that you can go and see. It's not quite the same because it's a little bit tricky to actually run it and play around with it, but it is there. I do want people to be able to see it and learn from it. But the whole bit rot problem, that does concern me somewhat. I think I've read several blog posts now from content creators talking about this problem in different ways, because you mentioned browsers having this, any given Tuesday they could do a release and your things won't work. I think front-end frameworks have had that problem for a little while. So I'm not a front-end developer, which surprises some people. I have a background in back-end development and SRE/infra kind of stuff. The front end has been a scary prospect for me for a long time, and it has been the thing I have to come to terms with in this, creating these blog posts. So I've tried to keep it as web standards as possible, under the belief that this is going to be the easiest way to make it have longevity. So I use web components, and I use them essentially raw. Like, I don't have any helper libraries to help me interact with them. I write web standards, raw web components. I'd say the only thing I make use of that I worry a little bit about if it'll be here in the next 10, 20 years is TypeScript. I think TypeScript it's proven itself as a very, very, it's sticky. The community has adopted it in a large sense as the way of doing types JavaScript. Is it still going to be the way we do type JavaScript in 20 years' time, or am I going to have to rewrite my stuff to use something different? It's really hard to say when you've got things like WASM making strides. Like, in the future, maybe we won't have a specific web language. We will compile to WASM from lots of different languages. So that's the only sort of what I would refer to as a fancy thing that I use. I don't use anything like Astro or Next.js or anything like that. I try and keep it as bare bones as I can.
Yeah. Looking at the load balancing blog, and of course, everyone can take a look at all of these at samwho.dev. I'm at /load balancing. The minified Pixie is only 130K. The irony of that page is that the fancy and sophisticated stuff, which is all of the animations, are 136K. But then you've got a 1 megabyte Plotly to do all of your graphics, which are kind of static and just kind of there chilling. They could have arguably been done with a PNG.
Yes. Yeah, they certainly could have done. In which post was it? I think in my hashing post, so /hashing, I wrote my own plotting library because I was a little bit annoyed that, like, wow, Plotly's 1 whole megabyte of JavaScript. I even I made the rookie mistake with some of my posts in the beginning by like having full-size images that were scaled down in CSS, so I hadn't properly scaled them down, so they were each like a megabyte as well. So it's been a learning journey. People have referred to me sometimes as a front-end expert just off the back of seeing these blog posts, and nothing could be possibly further from the truth. I'm muddling my way through this.
Have you struggled with people not realizing that they can click? Because like I was probably an hour or two into hashing before I accidentally figured out that I could click. And I don't think it's your fault. It's not that the graphics don't ask to be clicked. I think we're just not used to clicking.
I would be a little bit less nice than you were just then and say, I think it is at least 50% my fault. Something else I have had to learn while doing all of this is there's a whole career and like there's a whole body of research into user experience and user interface design. And I think the visualizations in hashing, they don't ask to be clicked. I think I have a thing at the beginning of the post that says you can click on things. Very non-specific as to what you can click on. I don't blame the user at all for not realizing. I think I could have done significantly better there. And my most recent post was on queuing, and it's not on my website. This was a company. This is a post that a company paid me to write for their own blog. That one was the second time that everything in the post is controllable by the user, and you are fully intended to interact with these things. The other one, I think I saw you had it open earlier, the memory allocation one, like you are driving that. And then queuing was the same, but queuing, so queuing is at encore.dev/blog/queuing. That's ENCORE.dev. That one is much more, if you don't realize you can click on those things, and none of the posts make sense. And I went through several iterations of sending it to friends. Friends would be like, I don't really understand what these visualizations mean. And I'd watch them, I would do a video call and I'd watch them go through it, and they're just scrolling. I'm like, you meant to click on the things.
Yeah. So I was looking at the hashing one, and I was thinking, because there's a pulsing ball at the top that says this article has visualization that can be clicked, but it is inside of a gray background, and I went right past it. Yeah. And then I was thinking to myself, as I am looking at one of the kind of static visualizations, not realizing that it's not static at all, I thought to myself, oh, a little ghost cursor just kind of like shaking back and forth, going click, like the way that iPad, you know how like there's a standard on iPads when you get an iPad and they like gray out the page, and then they force you to click on something, and they go one of two, two of two, or 3 of 4, and then they basically like they show you what the interface looks like. Then they gray out the page, and then they spotlight a thing, and then they insist, you're going to freaking touch this, so we're not going to let you get past it. And then I go to queuing, and you literally have a little pulsing mouse, and you literally put the word click there, which made it extremely unambiguous. So I assume that you cracked that.
That went through several iterations. It began, in the beginning, I was like, it's obviously a button. And I think this is me not being good at this at all and learning very much as I'm going along, just coming through, right? Like, oh, it's obviously a button. People should realize the big yellow circle's a button. And then I put just the cursor not moving. And I was like, surely this time people will recognize that is clickable. And still I got feedback from people saying, oh, I didn't know that at all. And it's really fascinating to me what you said about hashing, where you went past the thing that in my mind, back when I wrote this, I was like, this is blindingly obvious. Everybody should be able to see. It says you should click on things. But you just go straight past that. It's not, you don't, human beings do not scan top to bottom in like a very continuous way. Like we jump and we skim, and we don't fully take everything in. And you have to be aware of that when you're writing stuff. I now recognize that a lot more, and I think it reflects in some of my later work, but it's this whole body of user experience that I had no exposure to before I began this, that I've had to learn as I go along, sometimes through quite painful lessons with people to get like that. This cursor moving and it saying click was almost a joke. I was like, surely it doesn't need to be this signposted, but it really does. Otherwise, people are going to go past it and not get the experience.
Back to the like, how did you write it? I thought it was funny that you said you use Pixie JS and then you're like, but at some point I might just write my own. I kind of like both laughed internally and then winced because like we have an internet now where we have built up such a base of the pyramid that you can build, anything. There are emulators running in WASM, like it's a full virtual machine. And your solution isn't to use one of the 50 different 2D canvas things, but to like make another one. It's that whole, there's 12 standards. We need to solve that. Let's make a 13th standard. But really it means that you didn't find the one that does the thing you want for your use case. So I thought that was kind of funny. But my question underneath that is that when I'm looking at the queuing examples, there's like 5 or 6 of them. They're all kind of the same look, but they build on each other.
Yeah.
Did you get into your head and try to like build an engine to avoid reuse, or did you just copy paste them and then add a little bit? Like, is there code reuse happening here, or did you just?
There is code reuse. I'll zoom out ever so slightly. Whenever I start a new post, the first thing I do is I copy the old post in full into a new directory, so I don't have like shared libraries or anything like that. And then I chisel away all the bits I know I won't need, and I've slowly built up this core of things that end up getting mostly shared between the posts. Then I have a subject matter in mind. So queuing is a huge body of research. I was like, right, let's think about queuing and think about where do we want to be at the end of this? Like, what do I want the user to know? And I want the Encore, their thing is they want to aim towards more advanced readers, and they want there to be some practical takeaway from each of the posts. And I wanted to get to roughly the state of the art in queuing. Like, how is queuing actually done in technology? And I kind of went for HTTP, and I almost regret that a little bit because not many people do any kind of sophisticated queuing at the HTTP layer. It's mostly done at the network layer, like level 3, level 4 in the OSI model. But I digress. I build a single widget. So those like long visualizations with the buttons and the queues and the requests in them, I think of those as widgets. And then I will build a widget that is very configurable. So under the hood, that is a web component that you can pass in parameters for whether there is a queue or not, what the capacity of that queue is. You can configure whether there is one button or 2 buttons, and whether it's a low priority request button or a high priority request button. So I make it very configurable. And then I use that once I get to a point where I'm like, right, this displays all of the behaviors I think I will need to be able to display in this post. Then I begin writing the post, and I create a skeleton of each of the sections and roughly dot around what visualizations I think I will need, and I write around that. So it's a very visualization first approach.
When I think of visualization, I think of like Mike Bostock or is it Bostick, the D3 JS guy?
Mike Bostock, yeah.
Mike Bostock. And I know that I didn't know Pixie JS existed until I looked at your stuff. And I know that there are many different, things like this. But the Bostock work and the New York Times interactive work kind of like sticks out as being a really great way to do kind of like DOM manipulation. And then that could have been a way you could build on top of this as well. I'm curious if you looked at D3 before you settled on Pixie and then now thinking about doing your own thing.
So I didn't look into D3 a whole bunch. I'd used D3 in jobs previously, and without spending too much time thinking about it, decided it probably wasn't what I wanted. The load balancing code, actually I think almost all of my code, I try and do a very domain-driven modeling approach. So everything is simulated in as realistic a way as I could reasonably achieve in the time that I'd given myself. So the load balancing, I do actually have classes for like a load balancer and servers and requests, and it's modeled in such a way that it looks relatively realistic to me. And then the visualization is kind of hooked into what is otherwise seemingly realistic looking code. So it's all properly simulated under the hood.
Okay, so let me interrupt. You're doing like a model view or a model model view controller, like are you binding your view to an actual simulated thing, or are you just coding to the animation? Because I would have just coded the animation to make the animation look the way I want, but you have a model that models the behavior, and then you have a view that is bound to it.
Essentially, yeah, it's not as cleanly separated as that. The view is quite intertwined within the model, but the idea is that under the hood, there is a real simulation going on. And it actually caused me a ton of problems in the load balancing post because there is sort of non-deterministic aspects of it. So I vary the request cost and I vary the power of each server. So I found myself in situations where I was talking about a specific behavior that the simulation did not always display because there was a bunch of random variables. So I tried to very tightly control them. And I lost many evenings of my life to situations where I just sit and I'd watch the simulation. It just didn't display the behavior I wanted for 15 whole seconds. I was like, that's way too long. The user's never going to stay around to watch that. I got around that a little bit by being a bit cheekier with what I randomize in queuing, for example. When you look at the big like 4Q visualization towards the end of the post, there is no variation between like how long it takes to process a request, how long it takes a request to get into the queue. Like the time step for how long everything takes to move is identical because I wanted to keep as many things as possible non-variable. Like in reality, you would have variance, but I got so burnt by the load balancing post that I decided to be, I don't know, I say cheekier. It's just because it's a little bit less realistic. It frustrates me. I'd like these things to be as applicable to real life as possible. But I think when you are writing about very specific behaviors, you do have to make some trade-offs.
I have long believed that there are different learning styles, and I've had people, pedagogical, what is it called? Pedagogy?
Pedagogical? Yeah.
Pedagogical. I've had like pedagogical experts on who have said, well, it turns out learning styles are a lie, I still don't believe that. Like they've done like research to say that like, oh yeah, I'm an auditory learner, I'm a visual learner. And then they've done research to say, nope, that's not a thing. You think that's a thing, but it's not. I reject that. I fully think that like this kind of visualization is squarely in my area of interest. And if I think a certain way and then it is either confirmed or denied by visualizations and excellent ones like yours, I'm like, okay, cool. I do understand queuing, or okay, cool. I didn't understand load balancing and now I do better. What kind of feedback have you had? Have people become utterly unlocked by your posts and then just gushed about how like, this is what I needed. This was the learning style that I have?
I get a lot of feedback from people which does mention I am a visual learner, or, I really enjoy visualization as an aid to me learning things. I've heard this as well. I've heard that people saying learning styles is not a thing anymore, and I haven't dug any deeply into it. All I can really say, like for myself, I benefit enormously from being able to see something happening, and ideally from being able to like pause and interject and be able to modify the parameters and let it go again. And it's one of the reasons why when I'm writing code, I love debuggers. I love being able to just pause here and poke around at what's going on. I probably would say I am a visual learner. Hopefully not too much to the chagrin of people that don't think it's a real thing. One of the reasons I got into this, and there's a guy called Andy Matuszak. He is very outspoken in education. He has a remarkable blog where he talks about education. He's did a talk recently about how LLMs could apply in the education space, which is fantastic. It's called How We Might Learn on YouTube. Well worth watching it. He's got some fantastic ideas. And he has this post, I can't remember what it's called now. It's something like how books don't work or why books don't work. Something inflammatory like that. And in it, he talks about how it's a little bit sad that we're in 2024 and we're still essentially using the web for what we were doing with dead trees in like the 1800s. Like a lot of blog posts, text on web pages like that, the medium has not changed for hundreds of years. And it is a bit of a timeless medium. And it's, one of the most incredible inventions we have come up with as a species is language and writing and the printing press and things like that. But now that we have the web and we have these essentially like supercomputers on our person at all times, isn't it cool that we could actually do so much more with them? Like there's, we can do 3D visualizations of entire mechanical watches if we want to on the web in JavaScript, so they're accessible to almost everybody with a smartphone. I just think that's wild, and I really want to hook into it. Like people have come to know me a little bit as that visualization guy who writes about programming stuff in a visual way. But like visualization, I think is just the beginning, or it's like the obvious step, at least in my mind, of what can we add on top of text to make it more engaging and make you more able to understand what's being spoken about. There's all sorts that we could do. I love following TL Draw, the tool TL Draw. Like there's somebody called Lou Wilson on Twitter, and she's constantly posting these wicked experiments that she's been doing with infinite canvases, and she incorporates the webcam and audio and images and all kinds of mediums just being put into this big melting pot of creativity, and then cool things come out of it. And I think writing could go through something like that. I think we could make more use of all these different APIs and inputs that we have available to us in the web and create 10x better educational material than we have done with just text.
Yeah, it feels like when I think about like some of the early work that like John Rissig and the folks at Khan Academy did, which I think is in the same vein as the kind of stuff that you did. It was he built an engine. He did a ton of work like that, and still we find ourselves reading PDFs in 2024. And I'm excited that your visualizations run on an iPad. And I'm thinking to myself, computer science curriculum should be like this. From my 16-year-old, for the very first time, expressed an interest in computer science yesterday. He says he wants to learn Python. I'm sure there's some reason underneath that. He's never showed an interest before. He wants to do something, make some money or something. But I'm like, where's all of the computer science curricula that's not just static equations and static stuff on a printed page? There's YouTube. So it's like we have static stuff in a PDF, and then we have talking heads. Where's the part, in between? And throwing him at like CS50, the Harvard video, is not what I want to do.
Yeah. I have a bit of a confession. I don't like video as an educational medium, and this is very personal. I'm not saying you shouldn't like video as a medium. I have never been able to properly leverage video to efficiently learn anything. I feel like I'm way quicker reading and experimenting. Video has never done it for me, but it has exploded as a medium. I think there's so much video content out there now, so many like premium courses. Their delivery medium is video, and it just doesn't work for me personally, and I don't know why. There's a course I'm going through at the moment on SVG animation. I think it's svg-animations.how. It's text, and then it has its own SVG editor that you can apply the things that you have just learned, and it will give you it creates this like translucent overlay that you are supposed to create an SVG that overlaps perfectly with it to practice the different parts of SVG. And that for me is perfect. That's great. Like I have found that to be a delightful course to go through. Yeah, so I don't know why video just doesn't do it for me, especially as a visual learner.
I think for people right now, video works because it is passive enough that you can sit there and just let it happen.
Yeah.
It's effectively lectures brought to your house, and you don't have to do anything. But I feel like today, at my age, I'm ready for college. You know what I mean? Like I'm ready. Now I have the emotional whatever and the attention span that I could go back to school and actually pay attention and lean forward in class and sit in the front row. I don't think that at the age of my 18-year-old, 19-year-old, he's ready to do that. I know it's going to wash over him. You know what I mean? He's not going to be like steepling his fingers and like deeply interested. And I'm not steepling my fingers and deeply interested when I'm watching these videos as well. I'm going through a class right now called From NAND to Tetris. Are you familiar with this?
Yes. The I have it's based on a book, isn't it? There's a book I have it on my shelf somewhere.
Systems.
That's
building a modern computer from first principles. And it's pretty good because you've got the book, you've got the projects, you've got the code, you've got the simulator, and then you've got these embedded videos. But still, it would be amazing if the book came alive and had those inline. But again, we're still trying to decide whether we use Pixie JS or we write our own. Like here we are in 2024. Everything you just said is true, but we still don't have the tools to really start that project right now.
Yeah. I think I dodged that question earlier, actually. Like I don't know what it would take to create something that would work for me. I evaluated a couple of options other than Pixie JS, and the problem is that I just don't think there is a framework for people doing exactly what I am doing. Either they are, a lot of them are geared towards HTML games, other ones are geared towards really kind of smooth UI animation, which is not quite what I'm doing, but it's closer. The things that I care about, like I want it to be small, I want it to be very tailored to what I am trying to do, which is going to be a very, very difficult bar for any library that's not written by me to meet. I think just all these things in mind, and I think I have an unusually high bar for quality in what I put out. Like I won't put something out unless I am extremely happy with it. And that makes me much more likely, I think, to be the kind of person that will build his own tools. And there's a certain craftsmanship to that. It's a very warm feeling I get when I'm like, yeah, I'm using my own 2D rendering engine. It's like, yeah, I'm using my own saw that I made myself and I kilned it and I, built all of my own tools to do woodworking, which I, obviously haven't done, but it has the same feeling to it as that. I don't know if you could build one. I think Mike Bostock is the same person that is at Observable HQ. Is that right? Or is that somebody else?
I'm not sure. I know that he ran the visualization group at New York Times, but I don't know where he is right now.
I think Observable HQ is possibly the closest thing that I looked at that would be good for what I am doing, but it is a bit more about telling stories with the data, whereas what I'm doing is like telling stories about processes, and those processes are not necessarily deterministic. What I'm doing is more simulation than it is visualization. I think I've made a bit of a mistake labeling it as visualization up until this point. So yeah, I haven't found anything that meets all of my needs. It is the 15th standard, but I think part of the problem there is that I'm not looking for a standard. I'm looking for something that's very specific to what I'm doing.
Well, you're looking for results. And you're absolutely right. I confirmed he's a co-creator at Observable HQ.
Awesome.
Well, very cool. Well, Sam Rose, this has been just lovely chatting with you today. I appreciate the work that you're doing, bespoke that it is. And I would really encourage folks to check it out at samwho, samwho.dev. And of course, your recent post at encore.dev, the queuing post, all of that is linked to if you go to Sam Who, and you can also check out his Patreon as well if you want to support this kind of work. Thanks so much for chatting with me today.
No, thank you. This has been delightful. Thank you.
This has been another episode of Hansel Minutes, and we'll see you again next week.